We're off the rails. Now we are trains ourselves. No wait and see. Hello and welcome to this, our fifth lesson in the Rails series. In this lesson we look at active record. And active record uses object relational mapping. It allows us to use Ruby commands to interact with a database. So, simply put, a database, SQL relational databases at least, use set theory, mathematical set theory. For instance, we have books here, all the books ever, and books I've read and books I own. So, books I've read is one set which overlaps with another set called books I own. Now, Ruby, and Ruby on Rails in particular, uses objects and inheritance to represent these relationships. So, for instance, we can have a vehicle as a overarching class and wheeled vehicles as a subset of that class. We also have sailing boat on the right. Any grouping of items can be put into a set. So that's the first point. And a set is a collection of definite objects conceived as a whole. That's our maths out the way. Object-oriented programming depends on defining data fields that have unique attributes and behavior. So that is our way, through using Rails, of interacting with our database. So this is a pattern that was developed by Robert Fowler. And database tables or views are wrapped inside classes. So an object instance is a row in the database. When the object is updated, the row is also updated. So we can see our class book, and that inherits from application record. Application record itself is a subset of active record base. And application record class can't actually itself be instantiated because this self.abstract class equals true. It acts as an interface for active record base, and it also allows for the book class to hold but know nothing of the database. So this gives us a number of prerequisites. Active record needs to know where the database is. So that seems pretty simple, but obviously often something we can overlook. So config is the folder in which our database.yaml file is held, and that tells Rails where to find our database. We also create a table through our model which is plural, and that corresponds with the class name, which is singular. And the table always has entries with primary keys or IDs. So inside initializers, config initializers, we have a file called inflections, which automatically turns our singular classes into plural. So there's some quite clever, English rules there, really, aren't they? Rules of English. Person goes to people, ox to oxen, and various other rules there. We then can generate models. So we can create models ourselves in the command line. So we can do railsg model author for our books and give it a name and date of birth with an integer. And that will be a new class. We then can use RateDB migrate to pass the model to the database. And this, as we can see, creates a pluralized database table. We see the SQL there, create table authors. And if we look at the column names, which is actually a method from Active Record, author.columnNames shows us an ID, which has been automatically created, a name, a date of birth, and of course our standard created at and updated at. So, Active Record, with Active Record, we don't specify object attributes directly, but infer them from our table definition. Adding and removing and changing attributes is done directly on the database, and the mapping of the Active Record class to a database happens automatically in most cases, but can be overwritten if we want. Most of the time it's useful just to stick to using our Active Record inheritance. Finally, we do require an ID or primary key. So all tables will have an ID or primary key. In our next lesson, we'll look at Active Record in a bit more detail, including our CRUD commands, so create, retrieve, update, and delete.